Hi, Courtney Robinson here today to talk to you a bit about the housing crisis and what to do. I personally am not in this situation because my husband and I paid our house off just about 2.5 weeks ago, but we are 51 and 64 and we have been in this situation and have lived through it. And I want to offer some comfort and some information to those of you who are struggling through this, because we have grown children who are struggling through this. And a lot of times when you don't have perspective looking back, it is easy to get really afraid of what your future is going to be. And so I'm 51. I've owned 4 houses plus an Airbnb on my property, so technically 5 houses. We own 2 now. We own a cottage that is on our property that we built, and then we own our house. Before that, I had a house in town. Before that, I had another house. I had a lake house. And so I've had those 4 houses. The lake house, the house I had with my first husband, technically second, but I don't count the 9-month mistake. Then we moved to another house. We downsized. And then I sold that house and moved here. And then we built the little cabin. And so I just want to talk to you a little bit about what I've seen in my lifetime. When I was a teenager, there was an oil boom and bust and also a savings and loan boom and bust. And so what happened was houses, was similar to now in the late 70s, early 80s, houses were going really, really high, and then the bottom fell out of the economy. And my dad purchased a house for $50,000 that had sold for 2 to 3 times that. I remember, and while it was a beautiful house for the money, it was so cheap. It was in this neighborhood of beautiful houses, and all of these houses were empty, which wasn't really safe in Houston, Texas. It had been a really nice neighborhood, but all the houses were empty. The yards were growing up, and actually they did get robbed one day. But they ended up selling that house and moving to another house that they got a really good deal on. And over time, the market appreciated. Because my dad and stepmother moved there at the appropriate time, they didn't time the market. They just happened to get lucky to be able to get a house at a good deal. Then myself, I inherited a home with a mortgage, and my mom and I inherited it. And it's a long story, but I paid my mom the equity out of my portion of the inheritance. I paid my mom the equity and took the house over. Then I sold the house and bought land and built a house, which this was back in I want to say 99, but actually it was about 2001. And I was about 30 years old at that time when we moved into the house that we built. We way overbuilt. We were house poor. It felt like a horrible, horrible, horrible mistake. And in 2004, we decided to get out of that house and downsize because we had built more house than we could afford, and we were working ourselves to death with 3 little boys to pay for it. So we did, and it took a whole bunch of hoops and using a credit card and a lot of mistakes to get out of that situation. However, what we didn't know is that 4 years later, the housing market would crash. So we were able to sell that house for $211,000 back in 2004. Later, in 2008, when the housing market crashed, that house went on the market for $179,000. I'm not even sure that it sold for that. I want to say it sold closer to $169,000. But I remember it was like $40,000 or less than what we sold the house for. Now, I had watched that house over the years because it was a really cool house. We had an up-and-coming architect design it and build it, and it was such a cool house. But I watched it over the years, and it never got back up to the $211,000 that we sold it for. So that right there tells you, just looking over history, I can see these massive ups and downs, and we're in an up right now. And what goes up has to come down. Now, after the 2008 housing crisis, they stopped building homes at the rate that they were. And you have all these situations where when people sell land or big lots, what they're doing is they have these minimum requirements for covenants. And there's all these different laws and covenants that are restrictive to building affordable housing, and the government's aware of this, and at some point this is going to have to change. In some areas, I was talking to a man the other day, and he was talking about, he lives outside of Dallas, and in this suburb that was the country, he said they're just building cheap houses like crazy. I don't know that that's the solution, but there has to be a solution, because we literally have a housing shortage. We do not have enough houses for people to live in. And I kind of question that, because I don't know that we've seen the population growth to that level, because we actually, some people, by some accounts, population has actually slowed down a little bit, because millennials and stuff are not, and Generation X are not having babies as fast or as large as families as people my generation did, Generation X and the baby boomers. So also you have the up and coming, well, not up and coming, that is actually up and coming with all these big real estate landlords that are buying, these big companies that are buying up houses to rent. And then you have the Airbnb, which I own an Airbnb. I'm not opposed to having a long-term rental. I actually built it for a family member. That didn't work out, turned it into an Airbnb. But right now it's not suited for long-term use. It doesn't have a washer and dryer. And I don't want people using my washer and dryer. So where I live, there are a lot of Airbnbs. That's also taking up the rental market. They've just put some parameters on that, and that's why you're seeing that. And if people gripe about that, the problem with that is if we have too many Airbnbs and not enough of the long-term rentals, you begin to really have a problem with the housing market. So as those parameters are put on, I think this is a good thing. And this is what I have suggested to my children and to young people that I have coached, or people that I have, it's mostly Gen Z and millennials that you're seeing go through this problem. And this is what I have told them. You want to focus on getting out of debt right now, if you have any debt, and saving for a down payment and having an emergency fund. That way, if this all falls apart and the housing market goes down, you are then in a position to buy. If not, you're still in a better position. You're always in a better position when you have a low debt to income ratio. If you're watching this and you don't know about buying houses, they're going to look at your debt to income ratio. For easy math, let's say you make $4,000 a month. They're going to say, well, you can't have more than 30 to 40% of your income going to debt. So if you have a car payment and student loans, they're going to back that off of that 40%. And what is left is going to be your house payment. So you're going to qualify for less. They'll do the same thing when you're looking to buy a car and things like that. So getting out of debt is crucial. The second thing is, the more you put down, the less likely you're going to have private mortgage insurance, which is required by government-backed loans if you put down less than 20%. So making sure you have a larger down payment. And also the next thing I would say is to look at alternative methods of living. So a lot of these people that I talk to are in different situations. I have 6 children, and I just talked to one friend who has 2 children and 4 dogs. They are temporarily living in an RV. I have a son that wants to buy a house that has a cat and is living in an apartment, 2-bedroom house, and he pays about $800 a month, which is about a third of his income. Plus he has a $350 car payment. So it really makes me nervous for him. I'm sorry, my dog is now coughing. So what I tell people in these situations is, in this time, do what you have to do to survive and to get by. Don't even worry about buying a house right now until you're out of debt and have your 20% and you have at least a 3-month emergency fund. Live with your family. Get an apartment, a cheaper apartment. Rent something. Look at RV life if that's for you. Get a single family home that maybe wouldn't be your dream home, that needs some cosmetic upgrades, or if you are handy and can do some upgrades like putting in a water heater, minor plumbing or electrical, you might consider that just cosmetic. Like I know here about 30 minutes from me is an area that's kind of a resort, mostly older community. Younger people move there. You can still get a 2-bedroom, 2-bath, or a 3-bedroom, 1-bath. Those aren't really the desired homes, right? Because they're that odd number. Most people want 3 or 4 bedrooms and 2-bath minimum for around $100,000 to $150,000. They're not exactly the most desirable, but if you can make something like that work, if you have 1 kid or you have 2 kids that are close in age that can share a bedroom, that can often work. Like if you have 2 little boys that are 8 and 10, they could share a bedroom. And you can make that work for a while. People did it all the time, letting go of the expectations of what you think society expects of you. And the other thing is taking in a roommate, especially if you live alone. I have one son that's in graduate school. He lives in a house with 3 other people. They all pay $500 a month for a bedroom, and they share bathrooms. And maybe you're just in a situation where you need to stay put where you are and work on your goals. So thinking outside the box, a thought exercise that is really helpful for problem solving is to draw a big circle on a piece of paper and put your problem in it, and then put thought bubbles all around it. So like a big circle, a line with a thought bubble all around, and all the possibilities. It is important because of this brain-eye connection to do that, to look at it on paper, and you'll see these things. So if you write, okay, let's say you're living in a house and you have 2 cats and it's $800 a month and you want to buy a house, and you do this thought bubble, I'm going to live in an RV for $400 a month with 1 cat, and you think, there's a lot of tornadoes where I live. No, that's not going to work. But then you see this other option of stay put, and you think, well, I wouldn't be in any worse shape. Seeing the definite no's will help narrow down, because a lot of times in our society, even though it may feel like we have all these limitations, the truth is a lot of times we have so many options, and they're not always good options, but it can become overwhelming. We get decision fatigue. And so sometimes these things like these housing crises, they can last up to 10 years. More often than not, they're going to be 2 to 3 years before it's going to adjust. So hang in there, get out of debt, save money, have an emergency fund. You can also live a life of more freedom when you do that. And always remember, there are people who would like to be in your situation. So there are people who would like to be away from the burden of a home and travel. So maybe take it also as an opportunity. What opportunity can arise from this? Maybe it's time to move someplace, get a different job, or move to a smaller community. That is another thing that has happened is the pandemic hit. A lot of people moved from the city to the suburbs, and they can work from home, and it's just caused the housing prices in the suburbs to skyrocket. I know Montana, the housing prices went up like double in a lot of cases, and then the locals who live there, especially in Colorado and places like that are touristy, it put the local people, it displaced them because their rents became unaffordable. So hang in there, do what you have to do. That may involve moving. It may involve living, back with family. But try to remember that all things will pass. So I hope this has been helpful and some insight from an older lady. If you like this material, please like and subscribe. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.